You stopped the music.
Wasn't I supposed to set? Is that what I?
We're not live yet.
Oh. Okay. I'll be back.
All right, ready?
Am I ready?
Apparently, hold on one second. There goes the music. We're back. We are back. We are back. I wasn't sure if I was going to sing tonight, but it was requested in the green room that I sing tonight, Valerie. This is the Professionals and Animal Lovers Show. This is P.A.L. I'm your boy, Tommy D, also known as the Nonprofit Sector Connector, and my friend, my comrade, my pal, Val. What is up, kid? What's going on?
And sound musician tech.
Well, listen, you are. You know what? Look, if you play the music, I'll sing the songs. Nothing can go wrong. How we doing, Rebecca Sanin? What's up, Colleen Merlo? I got some stuff to read about the show, but how are you both this evening? What's going on?
Doing great. Excited to be here.
We're fired up. Colleen, how about you?
I'm feeling good and also excited to be here.
Good. I heard you're going to sing later for us, so we're excited about that. We're excited. Without a doubt, I want to sing on the show today, Tommy D. That sometimes that happens. And I'm just kidding. Colleen's not going to sing. All right, look, I'm going to read this right off of the website. We want to. We already are. We're amplifying the message that we believe the bond between animal lovers is incredibly strong. It mirrors that bond between animals and their pet parents. We used to say their owners. No, they're pet parents, right? We want to support each other by continuing to grow this compassionate network so that together everyone wins.
Especially the animals.
They do, but especially the people, because tonight we're going to be really talking about how people benefit from the connection with animals. And we have two leaders in what else would your boy, the Nonprofit Sector Connector, be hanging out with, but two leaders of very important Long Island-based nonprofit organizations, Rebecca Sanin from the Health and Welfare Council of Long Island and Colleen Merlo from the Association for Mental Health and Wellness. Val, how did you get such special guests? They haven't even ever been on the other show, Philanthropy in Focus. What are you doing here?
I don't know.
You are my connection to greatness, Valerie Heffron.
It is a magnet situation, and this is just evidence that animal lovers we bond, and this issue in particular is very, very important to me as an animal advocate, because as Rebecca knows, I reached out to her not too long ago, but like one of the things that I see happening a lot is that people have a mental health issue. They're probably very good-hearted people that start off with the best of intentions. They try to help animals. Usually it's cats, but it certainly can cover dogs and ferrets and all other animals too. But then you see them on the news. They're being arrested. Their animals are being confiscated by like the SPCA or another, animal welfare organization. And it starts somewhere, right? So just in terms of mental health issues, hoarding is certainly one of them. And then, of course, I know that the connection of animal abusers, a lot of them start off with animals, leads to other things like domestic violence and worse. So, this is a super important subject in my mind. I hope it's important to you too.
Val, I'm glad you're here. Before we even get started into the conversation, can we just find out, Rebecca and Colleen, can you just set the stage what it is you're doing business-wise, nonprofit really wise? So Rebecca, why don't you just introduce yourself, then we'll go to Colleen, and then I know we're going to have a lot of questions around mental health and the animals and hoarding. Don't come to the attic if you don't want to know about hoarding. So Rebecca, and then go to Colleen after that, please.
Sure. So I run the Health and Welfare Council of Long Island, which is an umbrella organization for the nonprofit sector. So we work with a network of about 200 nonprofits on every area of health and human services. We do advocacy work, federal, state, and local advocacy for human services issues. We do capacity building for the sector. We run coalitions, which is bringing people together from all different sectors to solve complex issues on Long Island. And we also engage in direct services to make sure that our communities most in need are able to live their best lives. And Colleen Merlo, who is the CEO of the Association of Mental Health and Wellness, is also my board chair and an outstanding colleague. So I will pass it over to Colleen.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. So my name is Colleen Merlo. I am the CEO for the Association for Mental Health and Wellness. Our goal is to help people maintain and build healthy, meaningful lives in the goals that are important to them. We serve people who have persistent, serious chronic mental health conditions, as well as the community at large who want to know more about how they can maintain and improve their mental and emotional wellness, because emotional wellness is not just something that a certain segment of people needs to pay attention to. Every single person listening needs to pay attention to their emotional wellness in order to work towards improvement. Another large area that we focus on is the health of our veterans.
Oh, that's fantastic. And, you know, I will say real quick, the one of the few silver linings, I believe, that came out of this COVID, 3-year thing, 3 years probably in counting, but is that I think the world, or most communities in general, are now putting health and mental health and everything at a much more front burner, right? So I think there's a lot more much needed attention and resources being put towards these issues.
I think that's
Yes.
true. And I would also say that the COVID-19 sort of unmasked, if you will, I know it's the weird term to use, but unmasked how much we impact each other, right? And that my well-being affects your well-being and your well-being affects my well-being. And if what we want is thriving communities, then we need to pay attention to the well-being of every corner of our communities. And, we're here talking about animals and pets are part of our homes, they're part of our families. And so when we think about what it means for our communities to thrive, we have to have a comprehensive definition of what that looks like.
Yeah, and I love that also you use the word advocacy. Legislative advocacy is such a key component. That's where I think there's sometimes a disconnect. I know there's a lot of animal lovers out there. There's certainly a lot of companion animal lovers out there, but they may not get that it's political, so if you want the world to be a better place for the animals, we have to change the laws or introduce new laws. And that's where we're striving to really make that difference and get that message out and create this team, of animal advocates. But
I think it's a really great thing that you're doing that. And I would just add to it, I think it's important that people pull back and say, not what do the systems look like today and how are we frustrated with them, but what's the big picture vision? What could they look like if we all come together the way that you and Tommy are building this movement, right? If we come together, what can it look like? What is the world we want to imagine for our animals? And then how do we work together to build that, as opposed to just responding to sometimes, what is, legislation that's outdated and not recognizing the value of our animals and the impact on humanity of those, sort of cross-species relationships.
I love that so much. And I will say, I don't want to talk the whole time. I'm so sorry. I can't help it. I'll cut myself off after this one moment. But what I really, really also must convey is that animal lovers in general, right? I think for the most part are good people. And unfortunately, there is some division, certain rescues might think other rescues are not doing a great job, or some people believe that, if you don't have a certain belief system, you're not a true animal lover, whatever it might be. But the truth is, I think of I think of like the Pet Avengers. The Avengers, the movie. And, there were some personality differences, like maybe Iron Man didn't get along with Captain America or something like that. And the Hulk didn't really like the guy with the bow and arrow, whatever it was. I don't really remember. But when they stand together, right, they're undefeatable. They're invincible. All right. So anyway, I'm just going to stop.
I can't even help you because I don't know those comic book movies. So I'm just like going, I hope she finds what she's looking for.
We have to put our differences aside. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And Valerie, I think that's a really strong point, because I think when you talk about anything, we focus so much on differences, especially now. And really at the base of things, we have so much in common. And if we could get to that place, it would be good not only for, whatever cause you're looking at, but for people's emotional wellness as well, right? Because we're all coming from a place of wanting what's good for ourselves and our family. And if we could recognize that, the person next to us might be achieving it in a different way, but that's really what people want at their basic core is, safety for the people that they care about, including the animals that they care about.
Yes, and we have to get rid of certain phrases. I will say, I used to say, and now, because then you start thinking about it, I no longer say there's more than one way to skin a cat. I now say there's more than one way to TNR a cat. Anyway, but Colleen, let me ask you a question. You started off early, when you were describing the organization, you mentioned the word chronic, right? So chronic illness, right? Chronic mental health illnesses. Can you just explain what that is and who is a person that will come to your organization? Like how do we help people that may need your services?
Sure, absolutely. Well, first of all, anyone who thinks that they may be struggling emotionally, whether they think it gets to the point where it would be a diagnosable mental illness or not, can reach out to our organization. We have a helpline that will assist people with getting to the services that they need, whether or not it's our services or out in the community. And I'll make sure I share that number a little bit later. But a chronic mental health condition. So these are the conditions that we're thinking about in terms of depression, anxiety, schizophrenia is one of the illnesses that we commonly see at our association. So when a chronic condition is something that isn't there one day and leaves the next, it's something that, is present and impacts the person's lives as well. I think that's one of the important definitions in terms of when you're talking about mental wellness, right? And I think part of the misunderstanding around mental health issues is we've all had days where we've felt anxious, and we've all had days where we felt sad or we felt lost. That's not a diagnosable illness unless it crosses to the point where, it's staying with us for more than 2 weeks, for instance, in some illnesses, or it's impacting your ability to maintain the basic functions that you're trying to achieve, the goals that are important to you. But a lot of folks look at that and they say, well, I had anxiety, or I was anxious that one day and I was able to, take a walk and be okay. But for someone who has a chronic mental health, it's not that, right? So there's chemicals that are involved in the brain and other things. And, there's a lot of things that contribute to mental health conditions, including brain chemistry and trauma and all of those things. So I think that's one of the misconceptions.
Yeah. And also I think that there's a judgy factor there, right? Because it's like everyone's different, right? And everyone reacts differently. So actually we had on someone last week, and she's involved with, she's kind of like, she does grief counseling, right? For pet parents, when sometimes she talks to them as they know that their dog or cat, they're getting older, or maybe they're sick and they know they're not going to, bounce back, whatever. But she gets involved, and she says that one of the biggest things is like for people not to feel judged. Like we know someone who lost her dog over a year ago, and she still cries every single day. And I get that, and that will probably be me. But I'm just saying, like, we have to get rid of that judgy factor,
Yeah, I want to ask our guest that question, because there is this stigma around this mental health conversation, and to Valerie's earlier point about COVID shining a light, exposing, maybe exacerbating to some extent just the prevalence of people dealing with mental health issues or realizing it. I wonder if, from a historical perspective, Rebecca or Colleen or Valerie or Tommy D, why do you think there is such a stigma? Because if I leave the attic right now and go down and I slip down the stairs and break my arm, I'm going to go to the urgent care, and somebody might give me a hard time because I slipped down the stairs, maybe one of my friends, but the doctor isn't going to look down upon me, or the society is not going to look down upon me because I have a broken arm. Why is it, do you think, if you have it, this is more of an opinion thing, although from a clinical perspective, please share that as well. Why do you think there's such a stigma around this conversation? And certainly is going away when you think of Michael Phelps, or help me out, the young lady who stepped away from the Olympics a couple of years ago. Simone Biles, thank you. Gosh, what it tells young people, like, it's okay to be, in pain. It's okay to address these things and not just push them away. That's a long
and take a step back and not suck it up. right?
Yeah. Listen, I get absolutely. Do you guys have any insight around that? You know, why as a society we have such that stigma around mental health?
And if you want to jump in or you want me to.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
I'll start. I mean, I think there's a lot of pieces to it, right? But just taking from a systems perspective, what we've done in our country is we've built a system which says if you have healthcare, you go here for your physical healthcare, your example, Tommy, of falling down the stairs, but you have to apply over here for your mental health care, which although there are parity laws on the books, in the state and federally, we know that people are often denied access to care. So we've bifurcated the system to say that your mental health is separate somehow from your physical health, which of course we know is not true, right? If I'm feeling anxious, it's likely impacting my blood pressure. If I'm dealing with cancer or some kind of disease, it's likely having an impact on how I feel and on my, overall mental health. And so we've bifurcated how we look at people's well-being, and we've told people that there's something separate and different about their experience with mental health issues. And I think that's a piece of it. There's also a value set in this, pull yourself up by your bootstrap society that we have sort of culturally, which says people are supposed to have control over themselves. You're supposed to be able to fix your problems. You're supposed to be able to get over your issues. And I think that very much drives a lot of thinking about mental health. Our school districts, a couple of years ago, probably about 5 years ago or so, there was guidance that the state came down with to include conversations around mental health in the health curriculum, but it was just guidance. There are no standards and no requirements. And so our youngest children, there's no standardization about talking to kids about their feelings and helping kids, just like we want our children to identify when they have a stomach ache and be able to say, my throat hurts, my stomach hurts, my ears hurt, so that we can get them care. There's no system in place to teach that to young children about, how they're feeling, and to be able to engage in identification of emotions early on, so that there's a difference, and so that there's language to be able to describe what those feelings really are, and so that we can properly get people support. And then lastly, there's a broken system. It's very hard to get care. Quite frankly, there's a gap in psychiatrists in New York State, and there's a gap in mental health care overall. Our nonprofits do an incredible job of providing support, which Colleen can talk about. But it's challenging. And on Long Island in particular, we have such incredible segregation. We have 2 counties, 13 towns, 95 incorporated villages, 124 school districts. Imagine trying to navigate, you have a need for your child to access care. Trying to navigate those systems is very difficult. And in many cases, because we don't have a public transit system and we have such geographic sprawl, access is limited for that reason as well.
Wow, there's so much there. I have we have to have a 3-hour conversation about all the stuff you said, because
that was one of the best answers to a question I think I've ever heard.
Yeah, and I know you have some background on the advocacy on the legislation side as well, Rebecca, right? From your work with the county. Maybe we can get into that a little bit into the conversation. So, Colleen, from your perspective, same sort of question. I mean, definitively, why do you think it's this way? And then maybe some solutions. And then we're going to get into the animals, because I know we're here to really talk about one of the major boons to people with mental health issues, certainly our veterans. And in a couple of weeks, I have on Philanthropy in Focus, Beth Zimmerman, Heads for Patriots, coming on Philanthropy in Focus to talk about that. But let's get into that, Colleen, if you could, just kind of from your perspective about what do we try? Why is it the way it is? Maybe,
Yeah, I mean, I think Rebecca answered that question very comprehensively. I think it gives us the opportunity to look at how we can make changes and reduce the stigma. And it has to be from all different angles. So it has to be on a personal level. Tommy D, you mentioned that kids are talking more and celebrities are talking more about mental health. And that gives me tremendous hope, because I think youth are more apt to talk about how they are feeling. And it's almost cool to see a therapist nowadays, which is great. I think every single individual can benefit from being in therapy. That's my personal soapbox, and I truly believe that. And kids, certainly, I would encourage anyone who has children. It's helpful for your child to have someone to talk to. But to Rebecca's point, it's also challenging to access when you really do need those services. The other piece is, around healthcare. We did not have parity in healthcare. So health insurance companies were treating mental health as a carve out. It was really expensive to get services. And we do have parity laws now, but how that plays out is another advocacy piece that really needs to be paid attention to. So if someone can't access care for something, there must be something wrong with it, or it must not be important. And that really does send a message in terms of how we look at treating mental health in America.
I think the thing, real quick, if I could make one point on this too, is the fact of an access to telemedicine, telehealth, teletherapy has been, somewhat, again, it's a result, an output of the pandemic. But I know, we own an insurance benefits agency, Vanguard Benefits, and we're having conversations with our clients. One of the most important things they're talking about is what about mental health coverage for my staff, for myself, my staff? What does that look like? And I had the opportunity a couple of weeks ago at an LIA event here on Long Island, where Neela from EAC Network was on the board, Paul from oh my goodness,
Paul Pachter, yeah.
Long Island Cares.
Right, and Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds, we're on this to talking about these topics and how important it is to continue having this conversation. Rebecca, you were going to jump in with something.
No, I was just going to say that, when you think about how the stigma ultimately then plays out, so you have the whole access to care issue, but now imagine you're a parent and you've gotten your child, into care. If I had if you had a child who had a disease like cancer, right, what happens? The meal trains get set up. People are surrounding you with love all the time, providing food, supporting your family. When a family has a child who has a new diagnosis of bipolar disorder or something else, a lot of times that's not the case, because there isn't that education, there isn't that sort of ubiquitous understanding of what that means, of the fact that that is, as Colleen talked about, a persistent disease. So people often end up being isolated, and rather than being surrounded with a support network, they end up feeling not only stigmatized, but just completely alone at a time when there's
Like
such
a leper.
support.
Yeah,
Like a leper. You know what? I just want to say, I had this answer pop into my head. I'm not proud of it, but I do think that it's probably part of the problem, is that the word that popped into my head when you asked the question, Tommy, why do you think there is this stigma still, right? And there is a part of me that said fear, because I think that when people, like, we've all heard of people just kind of like losing their, I shouldn't say mind, but you know what I'm saying? Like they lose it. Like you knew them, they went to work, maybe they had a family or whatever. And then they just kind of like lost themselves.
Yeah.
Right. And you maybe, you're there maybe in the beginning or whatever, but then after a while, you're kind of like, I have to keep myself going. I have to surround myself with positive people. I have to do that. And so I think part of that is fear driven, and if we're going to bring this back to the animals, I will say this: there have been certainly days in my life where I did not want to get out of bed, and I was definitely feeling like you're in a funk, and it's just, you're not in a good place. But you know what? Your dog has to go out, your cats have to get fed, whatever it is. And knowing that people, or I should say, I just said people, that's so funny, knowing that others are dependent on you, I think a lot of times can drive you to get out of bed.
Did you see that show, Val? Have you ever seen the show? Any of my friends on the right here, or anybody listening elsewhere? Afterlife. It's on Netflix. It's a Ricky Gervais show, and his wife passes away.
I started to watch it. It was very sad. It was hard.
It was a very sad show. And the reason I bring it up though, Val, he's got a dog, and
Yeah.
early on in these earlier episodes where he basically doesn't want to be existing anymore, it's that dog that pulls him out because he's responsible for someone else, and maybe
he promised his wife, I'll take care of the dog.
Yeah, well, she knew exactly what she was doing.
Get up and buy like one can of dog food and come home and feed the dog. Yes, yeah. But also I want to make this point, because I'm not proud of that. I'm really not. Like, I can think of a couple of people who I know, they were going through things and all of that, and like I tried to kind of, be there and give solutions and all of that. And I'm certainly not an expert, but then after a while, you kind of end up fading away, because it's like, I don't feel qualified to solve someone's problems, A, but B, there is that fear of like, okay, well, is this going to rub off on me? Or I can't explain it. I'm probably doing a horrible job. I hope no one hates me right now.
Val, I would give you a hug if you were here, because you're not doing a horrible job. You're doing being real and you're being compassionate and you're being vulnerable, which I could speak from experience is something that people who are challenged through this type of scenario actually need. And I think you're right on. Is it fear? Well, I think it's fear because it's the fear of the unknown, and we're not historically have not had this conversation enough. And also often we know, certainly the professionals on this show with you and I today know that this is often a connection to, you know, mental health challenges. Mental illness is connected to substance abuse. I mean, these two things run neck and neck and are very, you know, connected at the hip, if you will, because it's maybe it's shame. It's I'm looking for some way to feel better about what's going on, and maybe the substances make me feel better, fill that hole, whatever that situation is. But potentially it's the animals. Look, this show, Val, you came to me with this idea. You said, I want to do a show about animals and animal advocacy and all the thing. And we're here now having at 6 o'clock at night, having a discussion about mental health, which is a discussion that we need to consistently have. So thank you for this. So please just be compassionate for yourself on.
No, I appreciate it.
Right?
I don't consider myself to be a judgmental person. I'm just trying, that's just the honest to God answer that pops into my head. But I'll give you another great example of the animal, the power of the animal, right? We all know this now infamous, I don't even know the right words to describe it, probably nothing I should say on the show, but New York Congressman George Santos, you know,
Who's that?
One of the, forget about what party you're in, okay, this is just a disgrace to democracy, but that said, one of the many lies that this man told is that he had an animal charity. And it has come out recently that one of the things he did was he created a fundraiser that was supposed to be raising monies for a homeless veteran's dog who needed life-saving surgery. Okay, he raised $3,000 and that money never got to where it was supposed to go. That said, the veteran was quoted as saying, you know, he was suicidal. He had suicidal thoughts several times. And what kept him from, you know, ending his own life was this bond with his dog, because he knew she needed him and he loved her and she loved him. And he knew he would devastate her if he just, you know, did that. So, you know, there's literally life-saving components to the animal and
so I think, yeah, and so I think just going back to what you said before, Val, and sort of comments that you made, I think the thing that we have to remember is that, you know, as human beings, you know, holding sacred space for people when they're hurting, it's not about coming into the space with solutions. And so when we think about what our animals teach us, right, when we're hurting, our animals just show up and put their head on us and give us love, or show up and, you know, mirror for us our energy, or show up and just, you know, bear witness to our experience. And that's really what humans need from each other as well. It's not just as, you know, when you show up for somebody who has a cancer diagnosis, nobody thinks you know how to cure cancer. You don't have to have some brilliant solution. It's the same thing with mental health. It's about showing up and holding that space and being willing to walk into someone's sacred pain, and be present with them and bear witness, because what people really need and what they want is to be seen, you know, and validated as human in those moments. And
you're so right. And I never thought of it like that. And you're so right. And I thank you for that.
That's what changing the world, Val. No big deal, just changing the world. So I just want to say that this conversation has to continue and must continue, because we're all learning. And this is, talk about this particular show, we say we learn, we educate, and we advocate. And it's not just on behalf of the animals, it's behalf of the two-legged creatures that these animals do take care of. And what was coming up for me, Rebecca, was unconditional love. And that's what those dogs do. I know there's this whole meme about cats don't give you unconditional love. They sort of flip you the bird when you walk in the house, but the dogs go bananas. I don't know. I can't get close enough to them because they make me sneeze, those cats. But I'll tell you, maybe you guys can shed some light. Are those cats, when they and they're purring, and are they just as helpful? You like that? I had to get you laughing, Val. Are they as you know, as much as loving as those puppies are? And can you guys speak to that?
Statistics show that any pet actually can have wonderful mental health. benefits and ease loneliness and ease anxiety and ease depression, because it speaks to what we've already spoken about, that ability to give to someone else and tap into your own humanity and compassion and care for another living being. Valerie was talking about the veteran who, one of the reasons for staying alive, right, not dying by suicide, was that he had this dog to take care of. And when you're doing suicide prevention and intervention, it's about helping people tap into hope. And so that's what animals can help us do, is tap into the hope that is inside each of us, and to give us a reason for waking up each and every day and, having meaning in our lives. I think it's really important. And a lot of people who struggle with mental health diagnoses or substance abuse or with grief or with any life event speak about how their animals often are able to pull them out of that. Our animals are there for us regardless of what kind of day we've had. It's raining out, but my dog still demands his walk in the morning and he makes sure he gets it. And that's helpful for people to get out of bed and out in nature and walking and taking care of another creature, another being.
Tommy, I just want to say something that you're going to probably crack up at, but I was reading an article about cats and engaging cats and all of that. One of the things that it said was that the best way to win over a cat is to ignore them, because they basically will come over to you and they will try to trust you and all of that on their own terms. So ironically, people who are allergic to cats tend to attract cats. They tend to be like the first ones to attract them, and they want to be around you because you're paying no mind to them. Yeah.
He's sneezing just thinking about it.
Talking about them,
But the truth is, right? Just like people, you can't talk about cats with an umbrella, and you can't talk about dogs with an umbrella. All animals have different personalities, and there are cats that are super, super engaging and friendly, and there are cats that aren't. But I think what is more important is to recognize that when we think about getting a pet and bringing a pet into our family, the quality of that relationship, the type of care, the type of engagement is what determines whether or not you are going to get a cat or a dog or a turtle or a bird or a, whatever.
Komodo dragon. How about a Komodo dragon? Would you get one of those? Valerie has a Komodo dragon at her house.
I don't know why you keep going with this. It's not true.
Oh, it's a bearded dragon. It's a bearded dragon.
Nobody has a Komodo dragon. I shouldn't say nobody.
I bet you know who probably has a Komodo dragon? Our friend down in Cancun, Mexico. I can't think of her name. She probably has one down, even if she doesn't want one down there. She's on a farm.
She has an iguana.
Rebecca, I kid because I have to, because I can't help myself. But I think what I want to ask is, you represent, rather advocate on behalf of and connect as an umbrella organization with many of the nonprofits, specifically here on Long Island, right? And Colleen, I did not know that Colleen was your board chair, but of course she is, because that just makes sense of how things are in our world, certainly here on Long Island. Are there specific animal advocacy groups that, whether it be, we've had several on the show, Canine Companions, we've had several rescues on the show. Can you talk and maybe shout out a couple or two, one or two, who are really bridging that gap, whether it be some of the ones with veterans or Canine Companions dealing with individuals with intellectual developmental disabilities? Talk a little bit about that, kind of shout out some of the
I think it's more than, so it's a great question. And I think it's more than talking about and shouting out advocacy groups. I think it's really about how are we caring for the animals on Long Island, and how are we making sure they're cared for? So you take an organization like Long Island Against Domestic Violence, which Colleen previously was the executive director of, and now Wendy Linsalata is doing an excellent job leading that organization, focusing on animals in domestic violence spaces. Because one of the reasons that people often don't leave an abuser is they're not leaving their pet behind. It's the same thing that we see in a disaster. There's a hurricane, a superstorm Sandy again. Lots of people are not going to go to a shelter unless that shelter is inclusive of animals. And so thinking through those strategies and plannings, looking at our hunger organizations. Long Island Cares, for example, has a pet pantry. Because right now with inflation, a lot of people are having a hard time putting food on their own tables, but they have animals that need to be fed too. And so sometimes folks need to tap into a little bit of extra support for those services, looking at the role that animals play with our seniors. So many senior organizations, particularly groups that work with folks who have Alzheimer's and cognitive challenges and dementia, dogs are very calming to folks when they're agitated, and can help to, lower the blood pressure. That's why so many people are working with therapeutic dogs today, certainly our vets and others, and children. And I really want to say this because I think it's such an important thing to say. I believe the biggest superpower, and people hear me say this a lot, is empathy. I mean, to me, you could have any credential, have very many degrees on your wall. If you're not an empath, you know what? You're not a superstar in my book. That really is, to me, the most powerful credential you can have, is being able to go into someone's sacred space and experience it with them and stand with them in that space and understand people's feelings. And animals teach us empathy. And so when we're talking about, how do we create a better world? We talk about all the challenges we face. You brought up George Santos before, and we, so often we turn on the news and we feel overwhelmed by, oh my goodness, is anything sacred anymore? Does anyone have integrity? Is anything decent? It feels so intense. Well, the way we start to change the world is to teach our youngest children to be empathic and to care about each other, to see your humanness when they look in your eyes and have you reflect theirs back in yours. And they learn that from the loving and giving and the back and forth that comes in caring for an animal, in having to respond to an animal's needs and watching that animal respond to theirs. So I think there are so many amazing things that can be done and lifted up in the early childhood space, when it comes to animal welfare as well. But there are lots of organizations doing really creative stuff, because I think people are starting to pay attention finally to the notion that, we're not whole as families if we're not including every family member. And I can tell you, our pets are our family members, their souls entrusted to us, who we have a responsibility to love and nurture, and who every single day wake up with the passion to love and nurture us.
Oh my goodness.
Every single day. And Rebecca, you nailed it. I get so happy when, let's say I'm at a protest and someone brings their kids or grandkids. I'm like, the future is bright. Like, I get so happy. When Tommy brought his kids to the Compassion Awards, I was just over the moon. And I was on the phone today with a future guest of ours. He's involved with Pilots to the Rescue. They just did a rescue with Texas puppies, and they fly them to where they need to go. Anyway, the point is that he did a live stream. It was a young boy, probably around 10. And he said, hey, do you remember me? I was here a few months ago, and I actually was able to get on the plane, like a little tour. And the guy was like, yes, I do remember you. You have the same name as my youngest son. And, he said to me, the earlier the children get involved, the better for the whole world, right? One of the things I want to talk to you real quick also about advocacy wise, Colleen and Rebecca and Tommy, we had a couple of lawyers on a few months ago, Shayla Ramos and Donna Fiorelli. Shayla is a matrimonial lawyer, and she was talking about how the laws in New York had recently changed for the better in family matters. In legal family law, they now treat the pets as family members, as it should be. However, in the other courts, it's still property. So that's something, I don't know if you guys are involved with that at all, or if you want to talk about it, but maybe we can all collectively fix that, because that's not right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what you're speaking to, sorry, Rebecca, I didn't talk over you, is, pets can be named on orders of protection now, which is a huge asset in terms of finding safety for survivors of domestic violence and their pets. Because as Rebecca said, that was, in the 3 top reasons why someone doesn't leave an abusive relationship, pets always falls into there if there's a pet in the home. And pets are oftentimes threatened and hurt and even killed when domestic violence is present in the home, because they're used as a tool, as a pawn to keep the survivor in place and
it
not
was that. Yes. And it was also custody, and it was also, I don't know what to call it. It's not alimony, petimony, whatever. It was a combination of visitation rights, right, Tommy? It was pretty much everything that would be considered when you're going through divorce and you have kids.
Yeah. I just want to, if I could sneak in here one quick second, because I want to make a quick shout out to some friends of ours that came up in conversation here. Jen Capez has been on the show. I know a lot of our friends here on the show know Jen over at Long Island Against Domestic Violence. She's been here to talk about what Wendy and the team have done. And obviously, Colleen, you were at that organization for a long time. That's just, Valerie brings this story up, and we're in conversation with some other people just about what people who are violent tend to start being violent to animals as younger people. And we need to sort of get in front of that and educate just people to be looking for this, because it does, again, I sort of take some liberties because I don't have a background in this work, but it just, people who end up in trouble, who do really heinous things as adults and hurt people, often have a reputation of doing crazy things when they were young people to the animals. So I think it's just part of the conversation. Valerie and I are in conversations about doing some stuff with that. We'll probably reach out to you both, in another conversation. But
if I could just jump in for a second and just make it clear, right? We're talking about animals and we're talking about mental health. And I want to be very clear that people who have mental health diagnoses are not violent toward animals and are not violent in general, and more often actually are victims of violence perpetrated against them. So I know you weren't making that leap, but some listeners may, just because of the way they've been conditioned to hear things in the media. So I just wanted to make that statement. But I do think it's something to look at, because, if somebody is hurting an animal, there's something that's lacking in terms of their ability to be compassionate and empathize. And what is the next step if we don't look at that and make some intervention in that person's life?
And just tying that back to what was talked about before about stigma, right? If it's a child who is being abusive to animals, we all as adults have to not quickly go, oh my goodness, this kid is an evil, horrible, monster of a child. We have to say that this is a cry for help. Something's not okay. And how do we intervene and support this family and get that child the services that they need?
Yeah, thank you both for underscoring that. And Colleen, to your point, I didn't mean it that way. And thank you for saying that, because I think that is what we're talking about. We're trying to evolve and educate and do these things. So this is so important. This is such an important conversation. Thank you both. There's just another thing I want to just mention too. You talk about lowering your blood pressure, and Valerie probably gets a chuckle out of this because I sit on the board of Horseability, and whenever I need my blood pressure lowered, I text Katie McGowan and I say, I'm coming over. I need to see the horses. And it is, I literally feel calmer. I don't know if you can actually feel your blood pressure going down, but I claim that I can. And I feel better because of these animals that are there. Shout out to Tori Cohen, who was on Philanthropy in Focus last week from Long Island Alzheimer's and Dementia. We're going to be bringing the minis, and I say it on here because I said it on Friday morning, we're going to be bringing the minis from Horseability out to see some of the people who are experiencing Alzheimer's and dementia out of their facility in Westbury. So tying all these pieces together, as you keep bringing up these things, I got to just say something. This happened earlier in the show, and I pulled this up, and it's now become a theme in the show for the last 45 minutes. So I'm going to read you something. I'm not going to sing it. I believe the children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. Give them a sense of pride to make it easier. Let the children's laughter remind us of how we used to be. That's Whitney Houston, and that's an important song. And you all started talking about children, and being somebody who's raising a few, it's important to realize this and find that empathy and find that connection. And excuse me, to your point earlier, Colleen, just, when we see these things and these behaviors and these activities, is to lean in and be part of the solution and continue to help people evolve and get better.
And I would just jump in for 1 second and say, to the two pieces to that, to the point about advocacy, that we keep bringing up here, remembering that advocacy is really about partnership. Advocacy isn't just, big signs and fighting. It's about building relationships so that we can help to change people's belief systems when their belief systems are troubling, and influence legislation, influence policy, right? But to your point, also, Tommy, about children and making sure that we are honoring childhood, I think we have to really, really remember that at our core, this is where we build the future, right? So this is where we say, what do we want our children to know about life and about what's important. And it comes from those relationships with animals. The reality is that children will not save what they don't love, right? And so many kids today were like on these, devices all day long. Children are not going to save what we don't love. So if we want to address climate change, if we want to save our planet, if we want to, have a future here that's viable and safe for our communities and isn't, as we're seeing today, 100-day storms every few years, well, then children have to fall in love with nature and have to fall in love with animals and understand how magical and powerful that relationship is, both to animals and to their environment. And then they will be the warriors that we need them to be, to make sure that policies are in place to protect animals, to protect our environment, and to protect our future.
Yeah, and not
That's
falling in
so
love
well
with
said.
through
Oh,
you,
sorry,
just not falling in love with them through YouTube by staring at the little,
Right.
by
Don't
getting
Don't fall in love behind a screen.
right.
Right.
Vivian McShane is just giving us hearts and appreciation, and she's so thankful. And she just kind of references how 2 hours or more she's spending feeding and cleaning her after her animal and getting them the meds they need. And again, giving us all that connection and that empathy that you talk about. Val, you were going to say something. I cut you off.
I was just going to kind of emphasize what Rebecca was just saying. There's a great TED Talk. You're gonna have to forgive me, but it's literally called Plant Some Shit. Sorry, that's what it's called, if you want to find it. Anyway, it's about this fabulous gentleman who now runs an organization out of East LA, which is really dilapidated, very poor area, where he was saying there's really nothing here except liquor stores and fast food, and how he has to drive like a half an hour or 45 minutes just to get an apple, an organic apple. So he decided to take this one little spot of a block in front of his house that had grass, and he started planting like string beans and just like made a little garden, and he let people on his block and in the community come and take whatever they wanted, basically. And it grew and it grew and it grew, no pun intended. But the whole point is that he was talking about the importance of involving children, because now children were getting excited. They're learning how to garden. And he said, let me tell you something, children who plant kale eat kale.
Right.
So it really was, it's much better than that. I suggest everyone go watch it.
Christopher Lowry, does that sound right, Val? It said that's what it says. TEDx talk, plant some shit. And
Yeah.
it's plants. Listen to the plants, just to see if everything's on brand. Plants, the microbiome, and mental health.
There you go. Yes, that's the one. I've seen it at least 10 times, but I didn't remember his name, unfortunately. Oh, I have to ask this question. So for those of you who don't know, Rebecca she did actually run for office, which makes me so excited, because I'm all about getting more compassionate, empathetic people into office, animal lovers. Colleen, have you ever run for anything?
I have not, no.
Okay, yet, right? So
Well,
my question to both of you is, do you have any plans or potential thoughts about, throwing your hat in the ring? I mean, we know so many people who are now in office who certainly didn't win their first time around or second.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that for me, everything is, and I know Colleen is very, very much aligned in this space as well. Everything is about service and knowing, if you're in the right space to serve. And right now, I feel like what I'm able to do at this moment in time, coming out of COVID, where there's such a desperate need for coordination and advocacy, where we have a governor who, for example, in the mental health space is really interested in making investments, and we can influence some of those investments and make sure that things are done the right way. To me, that's a reason to be on fire, not just to get up every morning, but to be on fire, because we can really influence things that are going to have a really powerful impact on humanity, and on our animals and on our society. And so I really encourage and believe deeply that, again, speaking of what I believe is the greatest credential, we need more empaths to run for office. You can't have no integrity and lie to people if you're an empath. It just doesn't work. And so I really always encourage social workers and educators and folks who are not just, sort of following a typical path, to really see whether or not it's something that would interest them. And I encourage people to do that. And I think, civic engagement is something we all have a responsibility to encourage. Every single one of us You don't get to say that you stay out of that, because the reality is it's because people don't vote that we have apathy elected into office. And
I've
so-
heard that before, and it kills me when someone says that. Like, I know someone, I won't mention any names, obviously, but I do know someone who has a pretty decent like following in the world of animal stuff. And when the anti-puppy mill bill was going on, I attempted to put a post up with a call to action and whatever. And long story short, I got the famous line like, I don't really do political stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is not, but this is advocacy. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think you have to be a political person or choose a political side to advance important issues. I think you have to know what you stand for, and every single day take a step in that direction. And I encourage people to do it in whatever way is right for them. And for some people that's running for office, for some people that's, getting up every day and planting a garden. There's so many different ways to contribute. But we have to recognize that we have a responsibility, right? As people who have lots of beauty in their lives and lots of good in their lives, right? The four of us here certainly do. We have a responsibility as a result of those blessings to give back. And that's really what it's about.
Love that. Colleen, so which office are you running for?
How do we give
I'm
back?
already serving in my office as board president, Rebecca Sanin. So, that is my elected.
She was nominated and elected.
What a dynamic duo, honestly, and changing, the face of the world here on Long Island where we operate from. I want to ask you both, which is something that it's always important to me to understand this in these types of conversations is how can we help you? How can we help your organizations? How can those of us, we've had this, I mean, when it comes to this mental health conversation, we've barely scratched the surface, but we've certainly done that. We've started the conversation. Two questions for you both. How do we continue to have that conversation thoughtfully and where we could advance the ball down the field? It is football season. And what can we do to support your organizations? Yes, I know we're in the nonprofit space. We all need donations and things like that, but are there certain relationships? So the two questions there, big ones, and I'm giving you the big questions at the end, but how can we continue to make sure this conversation doesn't go away? And how can we, through our relationships, help your organizations?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to mental health, having the conversation. So every single listener is connected to something. They're connected to a school district. They're connected to a religious organization. They're connected to a business. Mental health needs to not just be a conversation that we have over here. We need to have it in every single space that we are occupying. And if folks listening aren't comfortable having that conversation or need help having that conversation, we can come in and do some presentations and help at least people learn about, the signs of mental health, how we can stay mentally well. That's what we need. We need mental health infused into every aspect that we can have it in. And our organization is happy to come out and have conversations and do trainings. And we would love to be invited. So that is a huge way that we, can continue to have the conversation and that you could be helping us while we're helping, raise the issue.
I want to collab with you on that. Vanguard Benefits, we're constantly having these conversations with our clients. As I said, being in the benefits business, this comes up very often, but we do a lot with the give back and would love to have you come out and do some work, whether it be webinars or in-person stuff, lunch and learns, et cetera, so we could certainly, and that's not just because it's me, gang, it's also for the rest of you out there listening. If you have a business with 27 employees or 7 employees and you need the education, because we got to start looking out for our associates better and better. And when I say associates, our staffers, our employees, because I got a chuckle last week or 2 weeks ago when I was at this LIA event, because we talk about having a mental health day. Now, that was a thing my mother said to me 30 years ago when we were in school. Hey, you probably just need a mental health day. And she was thoughtful enough to say that as where it was just like you were down, you had it, you needed it, you took a day off of school. It was a day as teenagers. So why should that go away as adults? It shouldn't go away. I say this a lot. I say, life can be challenging and we need to, I work with some coaches and on my own mental health and different things I'm working through, and you have to, sometimes you got to disconnect. I had to walk away from this computer 3 times today at certain points because it was the right thing to do for me. I had to get away and I always say this too, and then we'll go to Rebecca on the questions I asked before, but we got to be compassionate with ourselves. We have to not be so freaking hard on ourselves, gang, because you know what? if anybody spoke to us the way we talk to ourselves, sometimes it's really, it
Oh,
wouldn't-
we would punch them out. And I
Wouldn't
just,
allow
it's one of my favorite things about you, Tommy, because you make it okay to clear the deck, right? And you did it for me today because like I was feeling overwhelmed. We've been working very hard trying to prepare for this lunch coming up February 1st, which is next week. And, you know, we wanted to have something to kind of physically roll out, so to speak, or talk about. We wanted to announce something. And the truth is we're just not there yet. We're just not ready. And he knows I literally have been having nightmares about it. And I tell my husband and I'm just like this, I'm having these crazy dreams over this. And so he was like, listen, we don't have to do it. We don't, it's okay. Let's just do it right and clear the, it's this deadline is our deadline. This is like a self-imposed deadline. And it's okay if we need to push it back. And I was like, I mean, seriously, it's one of my favorite things about you. Like you make it okay to say, we'll get to it. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be okay. And
Well,
I'm just
it was
like,
stressing me out too. So I was a little selfish. I might have been trying to help you, but it made me feel better too.
aha.
No, not at all. Again, we have to be compassionate. We have to be mindful of ourselves and those around us for sure.
Right.
Rebecca, how do we help your organization?
Yeah, I think, you know, just first of all, I want to lift up what you just said, because I think it's a really important thing. It's great to be in community with both of you, with all three of you tonight. You know, and I think being kind to ourselves is not just something that we need to do sort of theoretically, but we need to do it as leaders, and we need to model it for our staff and for the folks that we mentor and for folks who are around us, that we are human and that we recognize that self-care is really a critical piece of leadership and well-being. And I think, you know, as far as how do we support each other regionally, I think, you know, kindness is a strategic decision. It's really easy not to feel kind sometimes. The world can be tough, but to really figure out how do we infuse that into how we lead our organizations, how we interact with people, and how we make decisions, and how we understand and listen when folks are very different from us, and make sure we don't just jump to, you know, how do we respond to something, but how do we really listen and listen more effectively. As far as helping the Health and Welfare Council of Long Island, look, I love to speak in front of folks about our region and what the challenges are that we face, because I do believe that the way that you build an army is by building ambassadors of message, and people have to really have the facts of what the challenges are here in our region, particularly for folks who are struggling with poverty. About 33% of our region can barely make a survival budget, and that's something that very few elected leaders understand and very few decision makers understand. The more people like you, Tommy, and Valerie, who have different relationships than Colleen and I do, understand that, then the more we're sharing that message and growing that army. And I believe, you know, that army needs to be built with love and kindness. And, you know, we're here talking about animals. It's got to be about lifting up our communities and the whole holistic version, the holistic understanding of our communities, which include, you know, all of us, our animals, our families, however they're defined, and in a way that's inclusive and in a way that recognizes that as America's first suburb, we can get it right. We can create a model really that sends a message nationally about what it is when a suburb solves its complex challenges and comes together to do that. I believe we can do it on Long Island. I work every day to make that happen, as Colleen does. And that's what we have to advance forward together. And it's all about us together. So whether it's, you know, I'm happy to talk with anybody about any human service issue that impacts our region, because this is, you know, I always joke that I'm the female version of Billy Joel. Not that I can sing as well, but I love Long Island as much. And it's, I'm a really, really proud Long Islander, and I recognize the unbelievable challenges we have, but I know we can solve them when we work together.
Rebecca, I'm going to quote you if you don't mind, and I will certainly credit you, but I like to put up quotes a couple of times a week on my Facebook wall, and I just wrote down what you said. Kindness is a strategic decision. It's so true. And it is also, to me, similar to happiness, right? Like you can choose to be happy, or you can choose to like hate things, you know, be jealous. You can hate whatever, it might dwell on your problems, right?
Don't find happiness, you bring it with you. That's
yes,
right?
another great one there. She's on a roll. I don't know, but and the thing that you said also about self-love and self-compassion. I have this gratitude journal. I make this really quick. I highly recommend it. I love it. I started January 1st, but you don't have to. You could start it any day. And every single day, it asks you what you're grateful for. And it also asks you about what acts of kindness that you did for the day. So long story short, I was struggling the other day to think of an act of kindness. I'm like, I really don't think I did anything for anyone today. And then it popped into my head. I said, oh, other than do my own nails. And I was like, hey, you know what? That counts. That counts
Yes.
because that was nice. to
Vitally
myself.
important.
It is.
It's
No,
vitally
and
important.
And let me just say, one of the things that I instituted here at Health and Welfare Council, and this is what I'm talking about in terms of strategic decision. Every Monday, I hand out thank you cards to every one of my staff, and we start the day with everyone sending a thank you card, whether it's to, a client, a colleague, it could be their mechanic, it could be anyone who they want to thank. But the idea is that when you're rooted in gratitude,
Yes.
the opportunity differently. And
I love it. Guys, I cannot thank you enough. It's been such a great conversation. I wanted to mention two quick things, and then I know Tom is going to say roll the music, but for anyone who feels overwhelmed or when it comes to the animal advocacy or frustrated and like, your voice can't make an impact, I really want to encourage you that it can, and it will. Some good news, California just ended their official fur sales. I should say the end of fur sales is officially in effect in California. And just remember, we just passed the anti-puppy mill bill in New York last year, and that was 6 or 7 years of straight advocacy, but it got done. So let's keep going. Tommy, guys, thank you. Tommy, you're
We're ready. Before we go, I was just responding to something on Facebook. I don't know if we're going to get a quick response on it now, but before we go, we've had this conversation around mental health issues, and if somebody's experiencing some things themselves, Colleen, I think you're the go-to on this. They should call your office. They should reach out. Who do they call? Can you just call that out, please?
Sure. So our helpline number is 631-471-7242, and the prompt is extension 2.
Thank you. And did you call it the website? Do me that favor, call it the website so they can learn about the organization. Then Rebecca do the same too. Thank you.
MHAW.org.
hwcli.com, and it's 516-483-1110.
All right, we will share all this information. Vivian McShane was asking if you ever hear from people who have animals who are have mental health issues or challenges, and they're looking for food for their animals. She wants to help out, so she's a friend of ours. We appreciate you, Vivian.
Really quickly, MHAW does have a food pantry, and we do collect pet food, so you can reach out to me, and we'd be happy to accept donations.
There it is, Vivian. We're making connections. That's the power of connections. All right, that's what it's all about. I was going to say, Valerie, cue up the music. So why don't we say that, and I'll read. Before you do it, let me read something. I won't sing the song from Whitney Houston, but I will say this: the greatness of a nation and its moral progress can be judged by the way its animals are treated. Treat your animals well. Treat your people well. We appreciate you all. Make it a great night.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, it's not working.
Tommy, you gotta sing.
I will say, go ahead, Val.
Thank you, guys. Really great show. Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys are amazing.
Right back.